So as some of you might know, in the last couple of months, Trust started a research endeavor called ARC2, and its focus was on collective bodies. So we wanted to question different metaphors that we organize with and try to imagine the meaning and the implications of every organ of this body. Now, this body is not entirely human. It's sort of like a chimera, a hybrid of many different organs. And one of them is the gut brain, which brings us to tonight's event. So we dedicate December to this organ of the gut, to intuitive, decentralized, cortex-less forms of knowing. Hidden in the walls of the digestive system, the gut responds to complex signals in our environments, silently influencing decision-making and behavior. The gut brain represents Trust's embodied and intuitive cognition organ, quietly tuning anonymous or even unspoken elements, like in our newly founded Whispers channel. The gut nurtures our own sense of collective gut feeling. So actually, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Jovana. Most of you probably know me, but for those of you who don't, I'm a maintainer at Trust. And tonight I have my dear friend Jenna with me. So Jenna Sutela is a Finnish artist based in Berlin. She works with biological and computational systems, including the human microbiome and artificial neural networks to create sculptures, images, and music. Sutela's work has been presented at museums and art contexts internationally, including Swiss Institute in New York, Haus der Kunst, Munich, Castello di Rivoli, Museo d'Arte Contemporanea, Rivoli Turin, Shanghai Biennale, Liverpool Biennale, Kunsthalle Trondheim, and we continue, Centre d'Art Contemporain Genève, Serpentine Galleries, Moderne Museet. She was also a visiting artist at the MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology. So with this, I'm going to hand over the mic to Jenna, who's going to start a little introduction.
Hi. So I feel there are a lot of friends in the audience, and people might be quite familiar with my work already. Anyway, I've put together a short presentation of artworks that touch upon tonight's topics: cognition beyond the cortex and brains as open systems. I guess I'm often dealing with the boundaries of subjectivity, both human, more than human, and machinic. And I'm trying to challenge the narrow understandings of consciousness that scaffold an anthropocentric logic of value and meaning. This is an image of me ingesting Physarum polycephalum, the single-celled yet many-headed species of slime mold, in a performance titled Many-Headed Reading in 2016. Slime mold is the organism that first led me on the path of biological experimentation after a training in media art and sound. The slime mold is often referred to as a biocomputer. When ingesting it, I imagine that its hive-like behavior is kind of programming my own. A performance guided by the slime mold from within can be considered as a form of artificial intelligence. The slime helps me make connections where none previously existed. Its movement takes me where I need to go. The slime mold coordinates itself entirely through sensory feedback with its environment. Its cognition is identical to movement. It knows exactly and only what it does. This behavior likens to the theory of extended mind, a philosophical concept put forth in the late 1990s that the brain and its environment can be seen as an indistinguishable coupled system. The extended mind theory moves beyond the information processing metaphor by relocating intelligence from the brain itself to a type of distributed, physically situated, site-specific system. The slime mold does not need to have a brain any more than it needs to have a mouth. The entire organism in its environment acts as a brain already. This is the famous Tokyo Railway Network experiment by Toshiyuki Nakagaki, a mathematical biologist at the Hokkaido University who I visited some years ago. In his experiment, the slime mold not only mimicked but also slightly improved the connections on the map by simply growing on it or towards nutrition placed where the stations would be over the course of around a day. And here's an image from my visit to Akio Ishiguro's lab at Tohoku University, where they made a soft-bodied amoeboid robot inspired by the slime mold's plasmodium. The robot, whose working title at one point was Slimy, moved as a result of the interaction of neighboring modules and friction from the surrounding world. Whereas robotics often focuses on controlling movement through motorized joints, soft robots adapt to their environments in real time, expressing ever greater degrees of freedom than their rigid counterparts. I've exhibited the slime mold moving around different kinds of mazes. This one, titled Minakata Mandala, exhibited here at MIT List Visual Arts Center, is based on a shape drawn by a Japanese naturalist named Minakata Kumagusu, who collected slime mold samples for Emperor Hirohito in the 1920s. In a letter to a Buddhist monk, Kumagusu represented his view of the world through the mandala drawing. With humans placed at the center of the diagram, our ability to comprehend causal connections between things diminishes as they are located further outward from the center, and our awareness of them becomes more tenuous. That's where the slime molds operate. There's another concept that I find quite useful, especially when considering us, our thinking and feeling as part and parcel of the wider environment, and that's environmentality. It was described in a recent paper on microbiome research by people from Medical Museum in Copenhagen. Now that human health, also mental health, is proven to be intertwined with the ecology of microbial communities living on and in our bodies, the categorical separation of organisms from their environments is also challenged. Environmentality is the state or quality of being an environment for something else in a particular context, a fully perspectival position. Thinking like this, categories such as individual / community, organism / environment, inside / outside are starting to get all fuzzy. Gut logic works in this way too. Jovana and I chose it as a title for tonight's event in reference to the gut-brain axis, but also as a window into amorphous plural forms of intelligence at large. I'll continue with an artwork from 2017. It's called Gut Machine Poetry, and it's premised on the idea that ever since the Renaissance, the most complex machines that we've developed have been used as the analogy of the mind, but the human mind is intuitive and too complex an organism to formalize. For example, the head brain works together with the gut brain. Computers are by design deterministic, they follow set procedures. In gut machine poetry, the idea is to introduce chaos into computing via inserting fermenting foodstuff into the guts of a computer. So I put together a homebrew computer operated by a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast in a kombucha tea ferment, and it produced this kind of new kind of language. What you're looking at here is a still image of a digital microbial poetry culture, a so-called wetware random number generator based on microscopic footage of a SCOBY connected to a series of letters. The stochastic movement of yeast eating sugar affects the jumbling of letters on the screen. The letters are based on a text about universal language. I'll show you a video excerpt.
E, 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 Ra. We plop, ole, see, row, how, ow, whoa, ka. We ase edit our hide e. Pepe onwe ye ris te e offer.
The word jumbling algorithm connected to the kombucha feed takes after Jumbo, a program that cognitive scientist Douglas Hofstadter developed to solve anagrams based on the actions inside a biological cell. In his experiment, letters are combined and broken apart by different types of enzymes that, as he describes, jiggle around, glomming onto structures where they find them, kicking reactions into gear. Here's our interpretation with Vincent de Balval. Another ferment nourishing the gut brain is this beautiful sticky substance called natto, made from fermented soybeans. This is one of my favorite foods, and it's featured here as part of Holobiont, a video I made in 2018. Similar to the concept of environmentality, holobiont, after Lynn Margulis, is a term for considering ourselves as assemblages of motley life forms interacting at multiple scales. The main ingredient of natto is Bacillus subtilis, an extremophilic bacterium that has also been used as a survival indicator in spaceflight experimentation. Tolerating physically and geochemically extreme conditions, its spores could have been blown to Earth from another planet by cosmic radiation pressure. Perhaps life itself arrived here in this spore-bearing form. Bacillus subtilis is the protagonist of my 2018 work, Nimia Seti. In this work, I placed the space and gut bacteria under a microscope, and together with an intelligent machine and a few ingenious humans, we devised a written and a spoken language based on the bacteria's movements, as well as early ideas of a Martian tongue in an attempt to give it a voice. The Nimia Seti project has its roots in the seances of the Swiss-French medium Helen Smith, who in the late 19th century claimed she could communicate with Martians. Her Martian language is actually considered as one of the first documented forms of glossolalia, or speaking in tongues, or vocalizing speech-like syllables that lack any readily comprehensible meaning. As you can probably tell, language, breaking language apart, reinventing it, or sensing the world in ways beyond language is a recurring obsession. While Smith's idea of the inhabitants on Mars was rather human-like, today extremophilic bacteria may be considered as the most likely Martians. And most interestingly, they are also known to live in our guts, and essentially they make us who we are or speak through us. In Nimia Seti, they are speaking through the intelligent machine portrayed as a spirit medium. My video shows a computer watching footage of the Bacillus subtilis bacteria under a microscope and generating a script or calligraphy based on an analysis of what it sees. We can watch a few excerpts. This is sort of a crystal that presents everything seen by the machine medium or oracle in the movements of the bacteria over a period of 12 minutes, which is how long the video actually is. The pattern came out looking like a brain. I guess a lot of my work looks at or looks for ghosts in the intelligent machines of our creation that are increasingly shaping our reality. On the one hand, the work is about getting in touch with the non-human condition of the computers around us, and on the other hand, it's about the computers getting in touch with the more than human world around them. I just had to include cooperation in my slides, as spelled in this beautiful way. I guess it goes without saying, but I still want to say that while the focus here is on interspecies symbiosis, particularly today, and of course always, extra attention should be brought to our responsibilities as part of the human society. So similar to the holobiontics and environmentalities that I've been talking about, the survival of the fittest narrative just won't do. Cooperation is also central to my practice at the studio and beyond. I already mentioned some exchanges with scientists and technologists. And while we're on the topic of the gut brain, I should bring up my residency at MIT a few years ago, where I got really into the topic of bacterial therapies, and in particular, their proposed mental effects. The idea that we can accommodate the bacteria of others through remedies like fecal transplants and feel better mentally, psychobiotics. On the campus, there were these stool-based biobanks, a bit like seed banks for plants, that focus on collecting and preserving the biodiversity of human gut microbes for future generations, basically viewing human evolution and existence through our symbiotic microbial cultures. A lot of work came out of this. However, instead of going into it all now, I will divert into this series of neuroplastic portraits that I've been making, finally bringing us to our collaboration with Jovana, along with Beth von Undal and Wanda Skachelova, who are also here tonight. So Imagma from 2019 consists of two parts. A physical installation of lava heads with blobs of liquid and color in motion provides a seed for the machine learning-based generation of images and text in a mobile app. Two of the hand-blown glass lava heads are pictured in the previous slide at Oslo Kunstforening. One of the starting points of this project is the lava lamp as the original psychedelic technology designed for those about to trip, as Timothy Leary put it. And another one are the deep dreaming artificial neural networks that present the more contemporary image of access to the thing in itself. The installation with cameras next to the heads draws from experiments by the engineers at Sun Microsystems in the 90s, who suggested that lava lamps were a useful tool for generating randomness. Instead of randomness, however, my work looks for patterns, signs, and meaning in the lava movements. The Imagma app is inspired by the origins of binary code in the I Ching, or Book of Changes, with input not only from the lava heads but also from mobile phones worldwide. It performs divinations based on the digital blobs that form. The divinations read like trip reports of sorts. In fact, Erowid Sulgin archives, along with the Internet Sacred Text Archive, is what the AI-powered system has learned from. Alison Parrish and Memo Acton were the tech collaborators here. And thank you. Finally, Pond Brain is an installation from this year. The title alludes to the alt cyberneticist Stafford Beer's idea about a pond ecosystem as a homeostatic controller. Beer was looking at how ponds are better than computers at reconfiguring themselves when confronted with emergent, chaotic, and unpredictable phenomena. Like him, I'm interested in systems open to the wider environment, a world made of brains. Pond Brain is an instrument and a fountain, a bowl of water made out of bronze that can be played or activated by touch, also known as statue rubbing. The shape of the pond is reminiscent of a head, an open one, in the spirit of a Chinese spouting bowl or a German Wasserspringschale. In addition to producing vibrating overtones, interaction with this object creates patterns on the surface of the water inside of it. As the sonic vibrations increase, water droplets start to bounce up from the surface. In the installation, sounds from the pond resonate with an artificial neural network trained with environmental and interplanetary sounds. The network tunes into sonic frequencies from the bowl and plays back an array of otherworldly resonances. Here, machine learning models were trained on sounds like star pulses and marine mammal vocalizations. The sound in the space is constantly transforming and thus exhibiting a life cycle of its own. Kudos to the Intelligent Instruments Lab at the University of Iceland. We can listen into the installation that's still up at Copenhagen Contemporary until the end of this year. This is a recording of a live stream from that space that I captured just before the talk, so almost like a sonic wormhole. Tech issues. I think we're in the wrong mode to actually play the file.
We can go back and play it later. I think maybe that's the best one.
And I was anyway gonna hand over to you with the last slide. And thank you more soon.
Thank you, Jenna, for this beautiful overview. Before we continue, does someone have a tissue? Speaking of biological materials. Okay, well, somebody search for a tissue. I'm just going to say that we're very grateful to have gotten such an overview of your work, because some people might know about it, but also there might be people who see it for the first time. Thank you so much. And here you also have a chance to ask Jenna whatever you want to ask and have this sort of direct input. So I think it's a very valuable evening that we get to have such a chance. And with that, we slowly open up the second part of this showcase. And as Jenna said, we sort of left it at this idea of open systems. But I would like to now explore it a little bit further and essentially present the scientific and the sort of like theoretical framework for some of the ideas explored in Jenna's practice. Cheers in the back. So, now, in order to explore gut logic, we basically start off where Jenna left off, that is, open brains. But what exactly do we mean by this? We all know that the brain is an electrochemical organ whose emanating activity synchronizes in meaningful ways. This so-called neural syntax is represented in brain waves, classified through different activity patterns and also different biological and behavioral roles. So we have alpha, gamma, beta, delta. There is not a single one global brainwave, but rather just cohesion of the same waves in different parts of the brain. And the fact that these waves are generated by tissue, by neural tissue, does not actually imply that they are also confined by the tissue. On the contrary, electromagnetic waves can be found all around us, inside our brains, between our brains, in our surroundings, interacting and entraining all together. Now, take the example of something called TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is a non-invasive form of brain stimulation, which operates completely outside of the body and the brain, but yet it affects the nervous system by applying a powerful magnetic field to specific areas of the brain. And currently, it's used mostly in clinical settings to treat depression as well as OCD, but it seems to have potential ways of treating other disorders and even maybe modulating or enhancing certain cognitive functions. Now, a second demonstration of this open brain principle moves beyond direct brain waves and actually moves into the environment. A study done by the neuroscientist Li Hui-Tsai at MIT discovered that exposing mice who were genetically engineered to have Alzheimer's pathology, so exposing them to flickering lights or clicking sounds in their environment, specifically at 40 hertz. And why is this important? Because the brain has a specific 40 hertz gamma brain rhythm. So that means that if we were to use that exact stimulation frequency band, that then you can basically affect certain cognitive functions of the brain. So in this case, this gamma wave plays a really important role in conscious awareness, perception, but also more specifically in lucid dreaming, meditation, mind wandering, even certain elements of navigative behaviors. So what does this mean in a practical sense? It means that the inner workings of the brain respond to their so-called twin waves that are found in the external environment, beyond the body, changing not just the biology, but also the behavior of organisms. Now, one somewhat controversial example of this modulation between brain and environment. This is called the God helmet. I don't know if some of you maybe heard about this weird device, but basically this experimental device was developed by Stanley Coren and Michael Persinger to study the neural origins of religious and creative experience. So that is, are there any religious centers in the brain? Can we simulate a religious experience? So by subtly stimulating the temporal lobe of the brain, participants who were wearing this God helmet reported feeling a presence and sometimes even out-of-body experiences. Many participants, in fact, reported seeing strange lights, funnels, tingling sensations, so very peculiarly similar to these near-death astral experiences. And strangely enough, seeing lights, flickering lights, is sort of like a weird inverted version of this light flickering gamma modulation that we just talked about. So basically, the mice that had this Alzheimer's pathology being able to stimulate their brains at this specific band in order to reduce the pathology of Alzheimer's and ultimately become healthier, this seems to be kind of like a strange inverted version. The person has a magnetic field stimulated on their brains, and yet they are starting to see the lights internally. So it seems like as if the brain is attempting to translate these signals into its own internal language and environment. And it just so happens that the host is accidentally a human being. Now, the God helmet seems to be scientifically a little bit questionable, but I think that these implications of the brain as an open system are quite powerful and worth mentioning. So the circle brings us now back to the title and the theme of this event, gut logic. What do we mean by gut logic? So Jenna sort of opened up this question a little bit in her part, but maybe the first thought that you had before coming to this event or even in the past is the gut brain is this kind of like intuitive, maybe even secretive, but very powerful neural influence on the entire body. But this type of logic, or maybe like mode of operation, is actually operating beyond the confines of just bodies. For example, like the electromagnetic waves that we just talked about and this open brain principle. The gut logic refers to a decentralized mode of sensing, a gut feeling, knowing without rationalizing. It also refers to the slime mold's inner cognizance, like Jenna talked about, and the many intelligent equilibriums found in our planet's external large-scale ecosystem. Gut logic is only made possible through open brains, which are systems containing bits of themselves and the external, both within and outside. A full dissolution of bodily boundaries. It refers to the neural syntax response to flickering lights and sound waves, but also other physical elements of the environment, influencing each other back and forth in many complex ways. Goethe's Epirema poem says, "You must, when contemplating nature, attend to this in each and every feature. There's not outside and not within, for she is inside out and outside in. Thus you will grasp with no delay the holy secret clear as day." I encountered this poem while doing this research and I thought it was very beautiful, specifically with this forever, never-ending cycle and the seemingly lack of boundaries between the outside and the inside. And this brings us now back to an old friend of ours here at Trust. We actually had a reading group with Jenna about a year ago on Discord. And in this reading group, we talked about non-human avatars, but we also talked about the homunculus, or little man. So this creature dates back to 16th century alchemy. It represents a lab-grown mini-human being capable of superhuman thought and strength. But also the homunculus was a big influence in the field of neuroanatomy, as it represents the sensory representation of our brains and how it responds to stimulating different parts of the brain. So it's also very much a scientific modern concept. But what if we were to treat the homunculus and this metaphor as instead being a mode of cognizing, maybe even a form of homuncular logic, this sort of cognition within cognition, a small human being nested within. In this way, the homunculus then encompasses the body within, but also beyond. What if the mind isn't extended, as Andy Clark and David Chalmers claim, as Jenna also mentioned, but is also already contained in everything in the form of cognition and logic? That's going to be one of my open questions of tonight. In this case, similar principles then may also be applied here. For example, from catastrophe theory or even morphogenesis, which is the biological process which causes tissue or organs to develop their shape by controlling how cells spatially distribute during embryonic development. All of these theories embody the principles that any sort of local change or stimuli can lead to global changes in a system or even a full organism. And therefore, gut logic can maybe even be viewed as a sort of universal mode of operating, described by mathematics, topology, and dynamical systems theory. And now a finalizing idea is the anthropology beyond the human, a very important notion that I want to bring up tonight. And this idea basically claims that we need to rethink anthropology in order to consolidate this new form of understanding of cognition, internal logic, gut logic, and this enmeshed nature of open systems and brains that we talked about tonight. So in a sense, or at least in my interpretation, gut logic maybe even invites a new form of animism, one that doesn't only perceive and acknowledge non-human entities, but it also respects and even worships these entities. And moving beyond worshipping spirits and organisms, maybe even worshipping physical, biological, and electrochemical principles governing them. So in a sense, this kind of ethnographic project may try to document a shift in our own understanding as human beings of how we understand life and cognition, informed by scientific knowledge, but also metaphysics. And this term, anthropology beyond the human, was coined by Eduardo Kohn in his book, How Forests Think. I have recently been reading it, and I was very inspired by the ideas that were brought up in this really incredible book, and I really recommend to read it. So the book is based on 4 years of fieldwork among the Runa people of Ecuador's Upper Amazon. And here, Kohn explores how these people interact with the many creatures inhabiting one of the world's most complex ecosystems. By drawing on the necessity to direct our ethnographic attention to how we relate to other kinds of beings, we can find that many existing preconceptions, for example, brains are centralized, brains are confined, or humans have unique cognitive abilities, all of these begin to break down. This perspective also emphasizes understanding the ways in which beyond human entities, like forests, for example, engage in semiotic processes, how they think and how they communicate. I will read a small part from the introduction of the book. This book attempts to develop an analytic, which seeks to take anthropology beyond the human, but without losing sight of the pressing ways in which we are also all too human, and how this too bears on living. And anthropology beyond the human is in large part about learning to appreciate how the human is also the product of that which lies beyond human contexts.